Hello and welcome to this edition of Back in History. In this edition, we bring to you the story of the ADC Airline Flight 086, which plunged into the Lagoon in Ejigbo in Lagos State, Nigeria on 7th November 1996. Several persons died in the mishap, including military men of various ranks who were on board the plane for a cause. There was also the renowned professor of political science in the plane, Professor Ejigbo. Ejigbo was a fierce critic of the military government of General Sani Abacha, who at the time was the military head of state of Nigeria. There were insinuations that the military government of General Sani Abacha had a hand in the crash, but the report of the forensic investigation concluded that there was no sign of any sabotage by the military or by anyone working for the military. The report rather noted that the primary cause of the accident was, quote, the untidy traffic command from the radar controller and thereof judgment at the last minute by the pilots, end of quote. In the course of Nigeria's history, several airlines have flown across its airways. One of the airlines that operated in the Nigerian domestic space was the airline known as ADC Airline. This was an acronym for, quote, Aviation Development Company PLC. The airline was founded in 1984 and its planes operated routes like Abuja, Lagos, Sokoto, Yola, Calabar, and Port Harcourt. Its chairman was Captain Babajide Alakija, while its managing director and chief executive officer was Captain Mfonudom. It was one of the much sought after airlines in Nigeria at the time, and the airline had a high volume of patronage on a daily basis. Unfortunately, this airline suffered two crashes at different locations and at different moments, with scores of lives lost in the two crashes. One of the two crashes was the crash that occurred in Lagos on 7th November 1996 with the plunging of the aircraft into the Ejigbo Lagoon. The flight departed from the Port Harcourt International Airport and its destination was Lagos. The flight was expected to land at the Murtala Muhammed International Airport in Lagos in about an hour. The flight took off smoothly and stabilized in the air at the appropriate altitude, and its cruising was good and without issues whatsoever. The flight crew consisted of Captain Dafie Koemi Sama, Captain Babajide Afolabi Afonja, Captain Lawrence Hussein, and Flight Engineer Bashiru Adegonke Folorunshaw. Captain Hussein was on the final part of his training and was the pilot who was in control of the aircraft for the majority of the flight time. He had control of the flight without any issues whatsoever. Everything went fine. The flight entered into the Lagos airspace and started its descent. No one in the plane knew that trouble was in the air waiting for the aircraft. No one knew that the plane was not going to land safely. No one knew that the plane would nosedive and plunge directly into the lagoon, and that all lives in the plane would be lost. As the flight was approaching Lagos, the pilot intended to descend to 16,000 feet. However, an aircraft with call sign 5N MPN had just crossed the ADC flight in the skies at an altitude of 23,000 feet. This was unusual, and in fact it was scary. But since the ADC flight was at the altitude of 24,000 feet, barely 1,000 feet above the 5N MPN flight, the crew of the ADC flight decided to delay its descent for a moment. When flights 5N MPN had completely crossed the ADC flight, the air traffic controller cleared the ADC flight to descend to 16,000 feet. The ADC flight crew, upon getting the clearance, then put the aircraft in a high rate of descent. What just happened in the air was a very dangerous situation, which would have resulted in a fatal crash. There was certainly a miscalculation by the control tower in the airport in Lagos. While the crew of the ADC airline thought that danger had been averted, something else occurred. During its descent to the 16,000 feet, which was approved by the air traffic controller, the controller quickly gave a counter instruction to the crew because another aircraft was on the same route and almost at the same altitude. The incoming flight was named Triax Flight 185. This flight was on its way from Lagos to Enugu and was climbing through 15,000 feet, while the ADC flight was descending in the same airspace at 16,000 feet. The altitudes were too close and the planes were in danger of collision in the air. At this time, the Traffic Collision Avoidance System (TCAS) of the ADC flight began to sound alarm, warning the flight crew of a serious danger close by. The entire situation was a horrible miscalculation by the Air Traffic Control Unit of the Lagos Airport. It was a total mix-up which exposed many lives to danger. It was not only dangerous, but it was unimaginable that such miscalculation could emanate from the control tower of an airport in contemporary time. The traffic controller, however, explained that he erroneously thought that he had earlier cleared the ADC flight to descend to 10,000 feet and that it was below the Triax aircraft. The controller then asked the ADC crew to redirect its flight. In the face of this confusion, Captain Sama, the more experienced pilot in the crew, took over the control of the plane from Captain Hussein. Recall that Captain Hussein was a trainee pilot who was completing his training and was in charge of the plane from Port Harcourt under the supervision of Captain Sama. Captain Hussein was not doing badly in his control of the plane, but the situation of the moment caused Captain Sama to take over the control of the plane. Captain Sama may have thought that with his wealth of experience in aviation, he would be able to rescue the situation. Sadly, his takeover of the cockpit did not help the situation. As a matter of fact, the report of the forensic investigation into the crash equally implicated him of ignoring the control tower's instruction shortly before the crash. Captain Sama may have ignored the instruction of the control tower as a result of the confusion that was caused by the control tower. But Captain Sama was wrong. Barely 10 seconds into Captain Sama's control of the plane, the situation became worse. The plane rapidly lost its altitude and in no time, it plunged directly into the Ejigbo Lagoon in Lagos State, Nigeria, killing all 144 persons on board. Not a single life was spared. A dark cloud engulfed the whole of Lagos and the entire Federation of Nigeria. The passengers that died were from various parts of Nigeria and other countries of the world. Humanity had just lost 144 precious souls. The time of the crash was exactly 17 hours, 3 minutes, and 40 seconds. This was the last recording in the black box. The plane in issue was manufactured in 1969. It was a Boeing 272-231 with manufacturer serial number 20054. It was 27 years old at the time of the crash. It was previously owned by Trans World Airlines with a registration number N64321 before it was acquired by ADC Airlines in 1995. The aircraft was found to be airworthy and had been operated by ADC Airlines until 1 year after, when the crash occurred. A renowned Nigerian political science professor, Professor Claudike, who was a known critic of General Sani Abacha's military regime, F.I. Ajumogobia, former chief of missions at UNESCO, was also in the crash. Several other persons, Nigerians and foreigners, were also killed in the crash. As noted earlier, the flight crew made up of Captain Dafie Koemi Sama, Captain Babajide Afolabi Afonja, Captain Lawrence Hussein, and flight engineer Bashiru Adegonke Folorunshaw. Captain Hussein was on the final part of his training and was the pilot who was in control of the aircraft for the majority of the flight's time until the flight was taken over by Captain Sama when the difficult times arose. The government of Nigeria commiserated with the families that lost their dear ones in the ill-fated flight and promised to investigate the cause of the crash and have measures in place to avert similar occurrences. Public-spirited individuals and organizations also commiserated with the families. A cenotaph was erected at the riverside of Itoiken River in Ejirin to commemorate the victims of the crash. The cenotaph was unveiled in November 1997 by then Minister of Aviation Ita Udoime. 25 years after the crash, precisely on 7th November 2021, a memorial event was held at the location of the crash by families and friends of the victims. The ADC plane crash of 1996 in Ejigbo in Lagos State, Nigeria, was indeed an unfortunate air disaster which consumed all 144 persons on board, and the memory of this crash shall remain in the hearts of many and in the history books of aviation mishaps for many years to come. Thanks for watching this edition of Back in History, and do remember to subscribe to the channel or follow the page for regular notification on every new video. I remain your friend and host, Ekemini Udim.